$24,391. We have the 12-box case break of 25-26. Upper Deck Series 1. We have an encore for Buffalo of Alex Tuck, composite speckle of Marco Rossi for Minnesota, and a compadres of Hellebuck and Morrissey for Winnipeg. Sizzle reel for Toronto of Matthews, Joaquin Kamel Young Guns for Nashville, and a goal-oriented for Montreal of Caulfield. Dazzlers, oh my gosh, for the Tampa Bay Lightning, Brandon Hagel. Canvas for Chicago of Nick Foligno, and a composites for Nashville of Forsberg. Encore of Weegar for Calgary, Bustle of Kiefer Sherwood for Vancouver, Rodrigo Abel's Young Guns for Philadelphia. Outburst Young Guns of Tolopilo for Vancouver. Tracking systems for Carolina of Kochetkov, and a composites for Seattle of Matty Beniers. Canvas of Connor McMichael for Washington, Jacob Quillen Young Guns for Toronto, and a portraits for Tampa of Brandon Hagel. Canvas black and white for Calgary of Connor Zary, encore for the Islanders of Noah Dobson, and a sizzle reel for Florida of Sam Reinhart. Tracking system for Florida, Linus Olmark, Young Guns for the Islanders of Mark Gatcombe, and a portraits of Dougie Hamilton for New Jersey. Tracking system speckle of Vasilevsky for Tampa, canvas of St. Louis of Jordan Binnington, Cup Quest for New Jersey of Timo Meier. Encore of Demidov for Montreal, compadres for Nashville of Forsberg and Yossi, and a Demidov Young Guns for Montreal. Population count 500 for New Jersey of Jakob Markstrom. Sizzle reel for Boston of Pasternak, and a compositions for Pittsburgh of Carlson. Canvas for Colorado of Nichushkin, Young Guns of Skarik for the Islanders, and a goal-oriented for Edmonton of McDavid. Dazzlers for Pittsburgh of Chris Letang, canvas for Calgary of Blake Coleman, and a goal-oriented for Ottawa of Brady Tkachuk. Outburst base for Chicago of Tyler Bertuzzi, tracking systems for Dallas of Ottinger, and a Cup Quest for Winnipeg of Kyle Connor. Canvas of William Eklund for San Jose, Riley Duran Young Guns for Boston, portraits of Sider for the Detroit Red Wings. Encore for Minnesota of Marco Rossi, Cup Quest speckle of Kyle Connor for Winnipeg, and a sizzle reel of Jared McCann for Seattle. Encore for Columbus of Fantilli, sizzle reel of Luke Evangelista for Nashville, and Young Guns for St. Louis of Dvorsky. Population count 1,000 for Columbus of Sean Monahan. Tracking systems for Columbus of Merzlikins, and a Cup Quest for Nashville of Roman Yossi. Bustle for Calgary of Kadri. Coco Young Guns for Seattle. Composite for Minnesota of Marco Rossi. Canvas for LA of Brant Clark. Young Guns of Tolopilo for Vancouver. And a Portraits for St. Louis of Dylan Holloway. Young Guns Clear Cut for Washington of Ethan Frank. Encore of Levchinov for Chicago. And a Bustle of Cider for Detroit. Sizzle Reel of Bouchard for Edmonton. Robidas Young Guns for Carolina. And a goal-oriented for the Rangers of Panarin. Tracking System Speckle of Joseph Woll for Toronto. Canvas for Boston of Jeremy Swayman. And a Compositions for Detroit of Larkin. Encore for Florida, Seth Jones. Bustles for Toronto of Matthew Nyes. And a Tim Wash Young Guns for Anaheim. Box 3. We have an Encore for Toronto of Morgan Riley, goal-oriented speckle for the Rangers of Panarin, and a Tracking Systems for Colorado of Blackwood. Bustle for Florida of Sam Reinhart, Rinzel Young Guns for Chicago, Cup Quest of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins for Edmonton. Dazzlers for Vegas of Jack Eichel, Canvas for Edmonton of Draisaitl, Portraits of Matthews for Toronto. Compadres for Edmonton of McDavid and Draisaitl, Parker Ford Young Guns for Winnipeg, and a Composite for Utah of Clayton Keller. Sizzle Reel Speckle of Owen Tippett for Philly, Canvas for Minnesota of Kaprizov, and a goal-oriented for Colorado of Nathan McKinnon. Encore for the Rangers of Zibanejad, Sizzle Reel of Marchenko for Columbus, Young Guns for Philly of Jacob Gauthier. Encore Blue for Columbus of Fantilli, Encore for Toronto of Matthew Nyes, Bustle for Columbus of Werenski. Outburst Base for Seattle of Jamie Alexiak, Sizzle Reel of Sebastian Aho for Carolina, and a Portraits of Tage Thompson for Buffalo. Canvas of Joel Eriksson-Ek for Minnesota, Carson Dorwart Young Guns for Philly, and a Composite for Ottawa of Stutzel. Encore for Nashville of Soros, Sizzle Reel for Winnipeg of Kyle Connor, Young Guns of Ryan Leonard for the Washington Capitals. Ooh, what are you? Oh, these are rare! Tracking Systems for Vegas, Aiden Hill, Cup Quest for Pittsburgh of Erik Karlsson, and a bootleg! Ryan Leonard for Washington. These are rare. Like, I think we're on our 6th case. That's the first one we've opened. Canvas of Matthias Ekholm for Edmonton. Young Guns for Nashville of Matthew Wood. And a Portrait of Linus Ullmark for Ottawa. Alrighty. Water first. Portraits Speckle for St. Louis of Dylan Holloway. Portraits of Matthew Tkachuk for Florida. Josh Morrissey for Winnipeg. Seth Jarvis for Carolina. Matt Zuccarello for Minnesota. Levchinov for Chicago. Gabe Perreault for the Rangers. Zach Werenski for Columbus. Cider for Detroit Speckle. Noah Ostlund for Buffalo. Connor Bedard for Chicago. Goal-oriented for Buffalo, Jack Eichel. Braden Point for Tampa. Elias Pettersson for Vancouver. Leon Draisaitl for Edmonton. Sidney Crosby for Pittsburgh. Jesper Bratt for New Jersey. A red of Jesper Bratt for New Jersey. William Nylander for Toronto. Sizzle reel for Nashville. Philip Forsberg. Nathan McKinnon for Colorado. Quinn Hughes for Vancouver. Leo Carlson for Anaheim. Dakota Joshua for Vancouver. Sidney Crosby for Pittsburgh. Mason Marchment for Dallas. Sidney Crosby for Pittsburgh. Wyatt Johnston for Dallas. The Crosby was speckle. Matthew Knies for Toronto. Jakob Markstrom for New Jersey. Brady Tkachuk for Ottawa. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen for Buffalo. Tracking systems for Boston. Jeremy Swayman. Samuel Ersson for Philly. Jakob Markstrom for New Jersey. Andrei Vasilevsky for Tampa. Joseph Wool for Toronto. Philip Gustafson for Minnesota. Samuel Montembeault for Montreal. Joey Decord for Seattle. UC Soros for Nashville. Cup Quest for Edmonton of Zach Hyman. Mitch Marner for Toronto. Alex DeBrincat for Detroit. William Eklund for San Jose. Jared McCann for Seattle. And Chris Kreider for the Rangers. We got some young guns for the Boston Bruins. Michael Callahan. Carter Mazur for Detroit. Cam Lund for San Jose, Sam Morton for Calgary, Oliver Moore for Chicago, Olivier Rodrigue for Edmonton, Dominic Shine for Detroit, Ryan Suzuki for Carolina, Ethan Frank for Washington, Quinn Hudson for Edmonton, Zane Parikh for Calgary, Nicholas Coco for Seattle, Snuggerud for St. Louis, Riley Duran for Boston, Sabranko for Ottawa, Dylan Duke for Tampa, Owen Sillinger for Columbus, Colton Dock for Chicago, Jack Finley for Tampa, Elias Pettersson for Vancouver, Skylar Brindamore for Carolina, Ian Moore for Anaheim, Noah Ostlund for Buffalo, Sabranko for Ottawa, Ostman for Seattle, Sam Morton for Calgary, Rory Cairns for Calgary, Nyman for Seattle, and Gabe Perreault for the Rangers. We have Encore for Colorado of Devin Taves. Oh, just one. Tracking systems for St. Louis of Binnington. Encore for Colorado of Cale Makar. Andrei Vasilevsky for Tampa. Travis Sanheim for Philly. Sergei Bobrovsky for Florida. Andrei Svechnikov for Carolina. Alexander Barkov for Florida. Moritz Seider for Detroit. Philip Forsberg for Nashville. Igor Shesterkin for the Rangers. David Pastrnak for Boston. Alex Ovechkin for Washington. Blue of Kochetkov for Carolina. Jordan Binnington for St. Louis. Kochetkov for Carolina. Mackenzie Blackwood for Colorado. Gabe Perreault for the Rangers. Nikita Kucherov for Tampa. Timo Meier for New Jersey. Dylan Strome for Washington. Blue of Leshchinov for Chicago. Zane Parikh for Calgary. Brant Clark for LA. Canvas for Columbus, Elvis Merzlikins. Alex Ovechkin for Washington. Philip Gustafson for Minnesota. Anders Lee for the Islanders. Ivan Barbashev for Vegas. Kyle Connor for Winnipeg. Alexi Lafreniere for the Rangers. Tage Thompson for Buffalo. Dougie Hamilton for New Jersey. Roman Josi for Nashville. Christopher Tanev for Toronto. Samuel Montembeault for Montreal. Mario Ferraro for San Jose. Black and white for Toronto, Joseph Wool. Lucas Dostal for Anaheim. Jared McCann for St. Louis. Kevin Hayes for Pittsburgh. Chris Letang for Pittsburgh. Cup Quest of Hellebuck for Winnipeg. Yossi Speckle for Nashville. Adrian Kempe for LA. Compadres of Matthews and Nylander for Toronto. Eichel and Stone for Vegas. Toffoli and Celebrini for San Jose. Ovechkin and Wilson for Washington. The Hughes brothers for New Jersey. For Montreal, Line and Slavkovsky. Makar and McKinnon for Colorado. And Tkachuk and Barkov for Florida. Composites for Montreal, we have Nick Suzuki, David Pastrnak for Boston, Robert Thomas for St. Louis, Connor Bedard for Chicago, Sean Monahan for Columbus, Sebastian Aho for Carolina, Kyle Connor for Winnipeg, Austin Matthews for Toronto, Rasmus Dahlin for Buffalo, Jack Hughes for New Jersey, Rasmus Dahlin for Buffalo, Dylan Larkin for Detroit, Sidney Crosby for Pittsburgh, Alex Ovechkin for Washington, Lane Hudson for Montreal, Connor McDavid for Edmonton, Dazzlers for San Jose of William Eklund, Noah Ostlund for Buffalo, Lucas Raymond for Detroit, Pink Dazzlers of Connor Bedard for Chicago, Ivan Demidov for Montreal, Jake Ottinger for Dallas, Martin Necas Pink for Colorado, Cole Caulfield for Montreal, Frank Vetrano for Anaheim, Jared McCann for Seattle. Portraits of Line for the Montreal Canadiens, Dvorsky for St. Louis, Levchinov for Chicago, Alex Ovechkin for Washington, Quinn Hughes for Vancouver, Brant Clark for LA, Wyatt Johnston for Dallas, Adam Fox for the Rangers, goal-oriented for Tampa of Kucherov, Kirill Kaprizov for Minnesota, Kirill Marchenko for Columbus, Sizzle Reel for Philly of Owen Tippett, Matthew Tkachuk for Florida, Arturi Lehkonen for Colorado, Cam Fowler for St. Louis, Nazem Kadri for Calgary, Igor Shesterkin Tracking Systems for the Rangers, Connor Hellebuck for Winnipeg ×2, Igor Shesterkin for the Rangers, Stuart Skinner for Edmonton, Charlie Lindgren for Washington, and a Cup Quest for Minnesota of Kaprizov. Ville Koivunen for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Levchinov for Chicago, Ryan Suzuki for Carolina, Kamel for Nashville, Matthew Wood for Nashville, Olivier Rodrigue for Edmonton, Tolopilo for Vancouver, Demidov for Montreal, Quillen for Toronto, Melanson for Seattle, Brindamore for Carolina, Robertson for the Rangers, and the duel of Demidov and Levchinov. We have Bustles for Carolina, Logan Stankoven, Owen Tippett for Philly, Jonathan Marchessault for Nashville, Tyler Bertuzzi for Chicago, Jesper Bratt for New Jersey, Brady Tkachuk for Ottawa, Evander Kane for Edmonton, Dylan Holloway for St. Louis, Seth Jarvis for Carolina, Alex Tuck for Buffalo, Evander Kane Speckle for Edmonton, Leo Carlson for Anaheim, Encore Boone Jenner for Columbus, William Karlsson for Vegas, John Carlson for Washington, Blue of Gabe Perreault for the Rangers, Wyatt Johnston for Dallas, JT Miller for the Rangers, Mark Stone for Vegas, Evan Bouchard for Edmonton, Juraj Slavkovsky for Montreal, Canvas for Toronto, William Nylander, JT Compher for Detroit, Kiefer Sherwood for Vancouver, Capo Caco for Seattle, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins for Ed Money, Connor Bedard for Chicago, Jack Hughes for New Jersey, Sidney Crosby for Pittsburgh, Sizzle Reel of Makar for Colorado, McDavid for Edmonton, Arturi Lehkonen Speckle for Colorado, Cole Perfetti for Winnipeg, Tracking Systems of Demko for Vancouver, Kemper for LA, and Cam Talbot for Detroit. I know we did in the last one. I think so, this one too, yeah. Tracking Systems for Anaheim, Lucas Dostal, for Florida, Sergei Bobrovsky, Cup Quest of Shesterkin for the Rangers, and Connor Bedard for Chicago, Compadres for Tampa of Kucherov and Hedman, Panarin and Lafreniere for the Rangers, Ovechkin and Wilson for Washington, Portraits of Makar for Colorado, Draisaitl for Edmonton, Eklund for San Jose, Kadri for Calgary, Goal-Oriented for Florida of Reinhart, Matthews for Toronto, Stamkos for Nashville, Sizzle of Luke Hughes for New Jersey, Alex Ovechkin for Washington, Matthew Tkachuk for Florida, Canvas of Montour for Seattle, Black and White of Sam Reinhart for Florida, Jake Neighbors for St. Louis, Young Guns Canvas for St. Louis of Dalibor Dvorsky, Young Guns Canvas Black and White, Justin Robidas. Young Guns Canvas of Joakim Kamel for Nashville. For Chicago, Oliver Moore. So thoughtful. And for Carolina, Justin Robidas. If I was thoughtful, I would get the darn high gloss. And a Luca Cagnoni canvas as well for San Jose. Composites for San Jose of Macklin Celebrini, Matthew Barzal for the Islanders, Quinn Hughes for Vancouver, Kopitar for LA, Sidney Crosby for Pittsburgh, Tyler Toffoli for San Jose, Gensel for Tampa, Dazzlers for Nashville and Marchessault, Dvorsky for St. Louis, Encore for San Jose of Eklund, Tage Thompson for Buffalo, Oliver Moore for Chicago, Mark Scheifele for Winnipeg, Frank Vetrano for Anaheim. Canvas, Charlie McAvoy for Boston. Tracking systems for Seattle of Grubauer, Ilya Sorokin for the Islanders. Bustle for Tampa of Gensel, Red Bustle for Philly of Tippett. Cup Quest of Nietzsche for Colorado, and Tage Thompson for Buffalo.
Okay. Yay.
Thank you. We have a canvas of Logan Stankoven for Carolina, Brandon Hagel for Tampa Bay. Sizzle reel of Mason McTavish for Anaheim, Ken Johnson for Columbus, Leon Draisaitl for Edmonton, goal-oriented of Ovi for Washington, Lucas Raymond for Detroit, Sidney Crosby for Pittsburgh, portraits of Gabe Perreault for the Rangers, Evgeny Malkin for Pittsburgh, Jonathan Marchessault for Nashville, compadres of Aho and Svechnikov for Carolina, Matthews and Nylander for Toronto, DeBrincat and Larkin for Detroit, Cup Quest for Vancouver of Thatcher Demko, tracking systems of Dustin Wolf for Calgary, Encore for Chicago of Bedard, Zach Werenski for Columbus, composites for Colorado of Makar, and a bustle of Matt Boldy for Minnesota. Young Guns! Rory Cairns for Calgary, Ryan Leonard for Washington, Jack Finley for Tampa, Quinn Hudson for Edmonton, Abels for Philly, Sam Rinzel for Chicago, Luca Cagnoni for San Jose, Dvorsky for St. Louis, Nyman for Seattle, Gatcombe for the Islanders, Dorwart for Philly, and Weissblatt for Nashville. We have Outburst Base, Niels Höglander for Vancouver, Nick Suzuki for Montreal, Tyler Seguin for Dallas, Bushnevich for the St. Louis Blues, JJ Peterka for Buffalo, a random between New Jersey and Tampa of Vasilevsky and Markstrom, and then we have Quinn Hughes for Vancouver. We have a Swagnificent for Anaheim of Radko Gudas. A clear-cut base for Buffalo of Yuri Kulich. Numbered to 250 deluxe for the Islanders of Semyon Varlamov. Clear-cut for Toronto of Max Domi. Number to 100, exclusive space for Toronto of Anthony Stolars. Clear cut base for Minnesota of Jared Spurgeon. Number to 250, deluxe base for the Rangers of Vincent Trocheck. Number to 250, deluxe base for Boston of Elias Lindholm. Population count 500, Patrick Laine for Montreal. Young Guns canvas for Boston of Michael Callahan. Young Guns outburst for St. Louis of Dvorsky. And a Young Guns outburst for Chicago of Colton Dock. All right, ladies and gentlemen, quick random here. Three times. 1, 2, 3. They will go to the right side.